In the marble corridors of imperial Rome, where senators debated the fate of nations and emperors, commanded legions from Britain to Syria, power wore many faces. But none was more extraordinary than a man who had once been property. A man who wore chains before he wore the insignia of a praetor. His name was Tiberius Claudius Narcissus. This is perhaps the greatest rags to riches tale the ancient world ever witnessed. A former slave who would accumulate 400 million sesterces and wield influence that made senators tremble. To grasp this fortune's magnitude, a Roman legionary earned 900 sesterces annually. A senator needed 1 million to qualify for their rank. Narcissus possessed wealth equivalent to over 16,000 times the senatorial requirement, rivaling emperors themselves. But money could not purchase safety in imperial politics. His story would end as dramatically as it began, in a final act of defiance that saw him burn the empire's most valuable documents before taking his own life. First-century Rome operated on the backs of millions in bondage. Between 10 and 20% of the empire's 50 million inhabitants were enslaved. But Roman slavery was complex. Educated slaves served as physicians, tutors, accountants, and secretaries, managing households and businesses for the elite. Through manumission, trusted slaves could be freed, becoming libertini or freedmen. These former slaves occupied a peculiar position, no longer property, but not quite free citizens. They carried what Romans considered a moral taint from servitude. Yet they could become citizens with restrictions, able to vote and engage in commerce, but barred from most public offices and senatorial marriages. Upon manumission, freed slaves adopted their master's family name, creating a patronage relationship that permeated Roman society. When imperial slaves were freed, they joined the familia sesterces, the household of Caesar, accessing the nerve centre of Roman power in ways even aristocratic senators could not. Among these imperial freedmen, Narcissus would rise highest of all. Narcissus's origins remain obscure, possibly from the Greek island of Thasos. He entered service to Claudius, that stammering member of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, whom the imperial family regarded as an embarrassment. Claudius's physical disabilities, likely cerebral palsy, had ironically protected him during the murderous purges under Tiberius and Caligula. When Caligula was assassinated in 41 CE, the Praetorian Guard found Claudius hiding behind a curtain and proclaimed him emperor. Rome suddenly had a ruler who valued competent administrators over aristocratic pedigree. Narcissus served as AB Epistulus, secretary of imperial correspondence. In an empire stretching 3,000 miles, controlling information meant controlling power. Every provincial letter, every petition, every crisis report passed through his hands first. He could expedite or delay, or emphasize or downplay shaping imperial policy with every response he drafted. This access, combined with Claudius's trust, allowed him to amass his staggering fortune through corruption, legitimate ventures, or imperial gifts, most likely all three. In 43, Narcissus demonstrated audacity few freeborn Romans possessed. Claudius planned to invade Britain, but the legions assembled in Gaul mutinied, refusing to cross the ocean to fight in that misty land. Claudius dispatched Narcissus to address the troops. A former slave commanding Roman soldiers sparked outrage. They shouted, "Io Saturnalia," mockery of the festival when slaves and masters exchange roles. But their laughter at the absurdity diffused their mutinous anger. The rebellion broke. Narcissus had accomplished what military discipline could not. The invasion proceeded, Britain fell, and Claudius celebrated his greatest triumph, owing it significantly to his Freedman secretary. Narcissus's relationship with Claudius's third wife, Valeria Messalina, remains complex. Ancient sources portray her as depraved, though modern historians question whether she was truly scandalous or simply a politically active woman vilified for transgressing gender roles. Regardless, Narcissus and Messalina formed an effective partnership in the early 40s. Together, they eliminated threats to Claudius and themselves. Ancient sources claim Narcissus fabricated a prophetic dream about assassination by Appius Silanus. When Silanus appeared shortly after, it seemed confirmation. He was executed, and Claudius thanked his freedman in the Senate. Such intrigues eliminated rivals and enriched Narcissus. After Scribonianus's failed conspiracy in 42, numerous senators were executed, their properties forfeit. But this partnership shattered in autumn 48. While Claudius oversaw harbour construction in Ostia, Messalina went through a formal marriage ceremony with Gaius Silius, a handsome consul designate. Ancient sources debate her motivations: coup attempt, religious ritual, or reckless passion. Whatever her reasoning, the public witness marriage effectively divorced her from Claudius. The emperor's wife had committed spectacular treason. Narcissus faced terrible decision. Messalina had been his ally, but her actions threatened everything. If she and Silius succeeded, Narcissus would die. He orchestrated revelation with precision, having Claudius's concubines break the news. When the emperor wavered, Narcissus pressed harder. If Messalina's new husband controlled Rome, Claudius was finished. The emperor panicked. Narcissus secured emergency command of the Praetorian Guard and moved swiftly. Silius and conspirators were arrested and executed immediately. Messalina fled. Claudius seemed inclined to hear her, but Narcissus, fearing weakness, gave the execution order himself. When told his wife was dead, Claudius asked no questions and resumed dinner. For saving emperor and throne, Narcissus received quaestor insignia, unprecedented for a freedman. He had reached his pinnacle, but this success sowed his destruction seeds. With Messalina dead, Claudius needed a wife. His freedmen debated candidates. Narcissus supported Aelia Paetina, Claudius's second wife, calculating this would let Claudius name an adult heir and avoid a child emperor's dangers. But Marcus Antonius Pallas favoured Julia Agrippina, Claudius's niece. She was Augustus's great-granddaughter, and her son Nero had impeccable Julio-Claudian bloodlines. The Senate passed a decree legalizing uncle-niece marriage. In 49, Claudius married Agrippina, who immediately consolidated power ruthlessly. She engineered Nero's adoption, sidelining Britannicus. She became the first living empress titled Augusta. Narcissus found himself sidelined. Agrippina, highest aristocracy herself, believed former slaves shouldn't wield such power. The rivalry between Narcissus and Agrippina defined Claudius's final years. Narcissus backed Britannicus as rightful heir. Agrippina was determined Nero would succeed. When Narcissus oversaw draining Fucine Lake, Agrippina accused him of embezzlement, undermining his influence. Ancient sources claim Narcissus warned Claudius about Agrippina's ambitions and her affair with Pallas. He openly supported Britannicus, promising to right all wrongs. But Claudius, aging and unwell, wouldn't act decisively. In October 54, Claudius died after eating mushrooms. Tacitus, Suetonius and Cassius Dio believed Agrippina poisoned him. Some claim when initial poison failed, physician Xenophon administered a fatal dose via poison feather. Whether natural death or murder remains debated. but timing served Agrippina perfectly. Agrippina moved with brutal efficiency. She'd sent Narcissus to Campania before Claudius's death, ostensibly for warm baths to treat his gout. This removed him at the crucial moment. Within hours of Claudius's death, she secured Praetorian support for Nero's accession. The 16-year-old became emperor unopposed. Narcissus returned to find his enemies triumphant. He knew his fate. Agrippina had him arrested and imprisoned. Ancient sources suggest torture. Whether executed or compelled to suicide, the traditional method for fallen prominent Romans remains unclear. What is certain? In his final hours, Narcissus performed one last act, demonstrating loyalty and understanding power's ephemeral nature. He burned all Claudius's correspondence, a decade's worth of carefully guarded letters. By destroying these documents, he prevented Nero and Agrippina from weaponizing their contents. He denied them the very weapon he'd wielded, control of information. The letters became ash, and with them disappeared Claudius's private thoughts, his unguarded assessments of those surrounding him. Historians have lamented this loss ever since. But Narcissus understood something more important than posterity. He understood loyalty. And he understood that power, however great, vanishes instantly. Narcissus forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, merit, and social hierarchy's arbitrary nature. By any measure, he was among Rome's most capable administrators. He managed an empire, diffused a mutiny, saved an emperor's life, and accumulated staggering wealth. Yet he lived under a social stigma he could never escape. A former slave in a society believing slavery left an indelible moral stain. His rise depended on proximity to power and his master's trust. His fall came when that trust couldn't protect him from those believing aristocratic blood trumped competence. Neither wealth nor capability could save him from lacking what Roman society valued above all, the right ancestry. But for a brief moment in the 1st century, a former slave stood at the empire's centre, wielding power senators envied and accumulating wealth beyond comprehension. His story reminds us that even in rigidly hierarchical societies, talent and opportunity can occasionally overcome birth's accidents. And it reminds us how fragile such victories are. The marble corridors where Narcissus walked still stand in Rome, weathered by 2 millennia. Tourists photograph them daily, rarely knowing the extraordinary stories those stones witnessed. Among them was a man who wore chains before office insignia, who commanded legions without serving in them, and who understood that all power eventually turns to ash and memory. If this exploration of power, ambition, and unlikely figures who shaped history resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing to Renaissance Finance. Share this video with anyone fascinated by the extraordinary stories hidden within history's grand sweep. Thank you for watching.